And I want to use one more phenomena with regard to front called as frontogenesis. Frontogenesis. Now genesis means formation of front. Agree? तो जरा देख लेते हैं what these fronts are all about and how the fronts are responsible to create low pressure area over subpolar latitudes. Focus. ध्यान दें. Now listen. When I talk about fronts, अगर मैं fronts की बात करता हूं, सुनिए. Then to make you understand the concept of front, initially I have to focus on one more concept in climatology called as the concept of air masses. Now see what these air masses are all about. Air masses are nothing but the bundles or packets of air. I mean huge mass of air, which are covering huge area, thousands of kilometer long area. But the air masses, I mean the air parcels, are having similar physical properties of same temperature and same level of moisture content. I mean, if an atmospheric condition develop over a huge area, presume thousands of kilometer long area, and in that particular area we are finding the air which have of course same temperature, I mean same range of temperature and same level of moisture content, then the bundle of air or the mass of air would be called as what? The air mass. Air mass normally develop over huge area, huge homogeneous area, huge uniform area, having the physical properties of same temperature and same level of moisture content or humidity. I want to give an example for that. Focus. देखो. So if you see some areas over the surface of earth, I want to demarcate that, which are much more homogeneous in their composition. See, like when I take the regard of areas, like I can demarcate of course an area that is nothing but of course Sahara. I hope you know very well. You heard about Sahara Desert. तो जरा देखो यहां पे, along the northern margin of Africa, somewhere down here, we are finding a very prominent desert called as what? Sahara. ठीक है? The extension of Sahara is also identified over Arabian Peninsula. तो अरब के ऊपर जितने भी डेजर्ट हैं, like रूबल खाली, रूबल दख्त, Iranian desert, they all are nothing but the extension of Sahara. ठीक है? So Sahara able to cover basically the whole continent of Africa, and of course also we can say up to a certain extent the landmass of Peninsula of Arab. Done? Now, but when I take the regard of Sahara, I mean the atmospheric condition that develops over Sahara. Sahara is nothing but a warm desert. So the atmospheric condition that develops over Sahara would always be relatively what? Warm and of course dry. I mean, we are finding which particular type of air parcels over Sahara? Warm and dry. Like I want to give an example. Okay? We can take example of one country, that is Morocco. Now Morocco is located along the northwestern margin of Sahara. And then we can take the example of one more country, that is Egypt. Egypt is located along the eastern margin of Africa or Sahara. So when you are traveling from Morocco and coming up to Egypt, you will find almost the same atmospheric condition. I mean the temperature would be same. पूरी जगह हर जगह गर्मी गर्मी लग रही है. The level of moisture content would be same. And then we can say that over the surface of Sahara, we are finding a particular type of air mass. That air mass is nothing but warm and dry air mass. Over the surface of Sahara, we are finding warm and dry air mass. Agree? So air masses are nothing but the bundles of air, huge air parcels, which are covering thousands of kilometer long homogeneous area, and which are featured by two similar physical properties. One is same temperature and second one, same level of moisture. Like I want to give one more example, that when I take the regard of Canada here, Canada is again a part of North America, we know very well. So in areas of Canada, normally we are finding cold air because Canada is located in subpolar zone, high temperate, and of course dry air. So we can say over the surface of Canada, the whole continent of Canada, normally we are finding air mass that is cold and dry, cool and dry. Air mass are bundles of छोटी-छोटी wind nahi, huge air that are able to cover huge homogeneous surface and which are characterized by similar physical properties are called as what? Air masses. Mass means huge, we take the regard of that. They are thousands of kilometers long. We are finding same atmospheric condition when we are traveling for thousands of kilometers. And then we can say we are finding the same type of air mass over the surface of Earth. Agree? So I hope you understand the concept of air mass. Now listen, when the air masses are originating over continental land mass, then the air mass would be called as continental air mass. When the air mass is able to develop over a water body, then the air mass would be called as what? Marine air mass or maritime air mass. So the air mass could be continental or maritime, I mean oceanic. When the air mass is able to develop in tropical zone, which also includes subtropical area, then the air mass would be called as tropical air mass. If the air mass are developing in polar areas, which also includes subpolar areas, then the air mass would be called as polar air mass. So air mass could be tropical, polar. Air mass could be continental, oceanic, I mean marine, maritime. Okay, so air mass on one hand could be warm. Air mass on the other hand could be cold. It depends. It develops over which area. Atmospheric condition develops over which area. They're warmer or cooler. And next, the air mass could be dry or the air mass could be humid. So we can divide the air mass based on their place of origin. I mean the air mass could be continental, marine, tropical, polar, warm, cold, dry or humid. Agree? Now understand my concept. My concept is when the air mass are developing over, be very sure, over a continental landmass, then the air mass would be called as continental. But by small letter we are showing over here, alphabet. Okay? Achha. If the continental area is located in tropical zone, what we are showing by capital letter, then the air mass would be called as continental tropical air mass. If the air mass, continental tropical air mass remain warm, then again we are using a small letter alphabet, and that is continental tropical warm air mass. So now the air mass would be called as what? CTW, T tropical in capital, C and W of course in small. Agree? Similarly, the air mass when they are developing over a water body, and the water body is located in tropical zone, like water body like Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal, they are in tropical zone. So the air mass would be called as marine air mass, but marine tropical air mass. And if the air mass, simply air mass means air, huge bundle of air mass remain relatively cooler as compared to continental warm, then the air mass would be called as maritime tropical cold air mass. Agree? Similarly, when the air mass develop over polar area, then the air mass would be polar. If over polar area but over continental land mass, then the air mass would be continental polar. If they are cooler, then continental polar cold air mass. If they are warmer, then continental polar warm air mass. It depends, relative factors there. Similarly, if the air mass develops over polar area, then the air mass would be called as polar air mass. But in polar area over a water body like ocean or sea, then the air mass would be called as maritime polar air mass. The air mass could be warm or of course cold. So in this symbolic manner we can determining or we are demarcating some air mass. But broadly I can say the air mass could be warm, cold, dry, humid, continental, oceanic. Oceanic means marine, tropical, polar. It depends where they are originating, where they are developing. Air mass means nothing but air, but covering huge area and showing some physical properties. Agree? Agree? Now presume that here I am showing the surface of Earth. ठीक है? Presume. ठीक है? And over the surface of Earth, I am demarcating an area that is A. And that area is characterized by low pressure. ठीक है? Now on the other side of A, we are finding one more area. That particular area would be very sure, presume that it is of course B. Agree? But this particular area carries warm air, relatively warm air. Similarly, when I take the reference of one more area that is C, agree, presume, and this particular area carry cold air. So now between the two different air masses, warm and cold air, we are finding an area where low pressure condition develops. Now the low pressure condition develops because of thermal factor or other factors also, dynamic factor. तो अगर लो प्रेशर कंडीशन किसी जगह पर डेवलप हो जाए, जैसे लेट मी गिव वन एग्जांपल, प्रैक्टिकल एग्जांपल. सी So here we are showing our country. Focus. Now presume I am demarcating three important areas of India. Let me specify over here. One is Shimla. Shimla, we know very well, is a mountainous city, subtropical city and cooler city, we know very well. In Himachal, height par hai to thandi hai. Then I am demarcating one more area, that is, you can say Bhopal. Bhopal, capital of Madhya Pradesh, a continental city. Okay? And then I am demarcating one more city, and that is nothing but Mumbai. Okay? So I can say Bhopal is located between Shimla and of course Mumbai. And presume, take an example, that low pressure condition develops over Bhopal. And now Bhopal is physically located, as we know very well, between Mumbai and of course Shimla. So the winds would come not only from Shimla, but the winds which are coming from Shimla towards Bhopal, the winds remain relatively which air mass or which wind? Cool wind. Because it is coming from Shimla, high latitudes, and of course mountainous area. And the winds which are coming from Mumbai, focus, towards where? Bhopal, because winds always flow towards low pressure. So jahan par wind ko low pressure milega, wind wahan se chalegi. So now the winds which are coming from Mumbai towards Bhopal, those air masses or those winds would be relatively warmer, because it is coming from a city which is nothing but a tropical city. Mumbai, warm area. So now the two different air mass, I mean the warm Mumbai air mass, is going to converge with cold Shimla air mass over Bhopal. Two different air mass are converging, colliding with each other, aapas mein takra rahi hain. I hope you are getting my point. So what I want to establish, that if there are two areas and one carry warm air, other one carry cold air. So the warm air able to basically what? Approach towards low pressure area A, and now the warm air is going to converge with cold air. So when the two contrasting air mass are converging, be very sure, focus karna, then a transitional zone would develop between the two. I mean a boundary would develop between the two contrasting air mass. That boundary or transitional zone is called as front. And the process of formation of front is known as frontogenesis. A transitional zone that develops between the two contrasting air mass is called as what? Front. And the process of formation of front is known as frontogenesis. Clear? अच्छा, ये जो front आप देख रहे हो, front is nothing but a frontier, I mean a boundary. I mean when you are going on this side of the front, you are going to feel warm atmospheric condition. When you are going on the other side of the front, again you are going to feel cool atmospheric condition, depending on the air. अब समझना, these type of fronts we are of course experiencing daily in our public life actually. जैसे कभी कभी आपने देखा होगा, in a particular area, in your city, sometimes the rainfall take place. But when you are going, of course, 1 kilometer periphery from that particular area or away from that particular area, rainfall does not take place and the sky remain clear. एक जगह बारिश हो रही है, थोड़ा सा 1 किलोमीटर आगे बढ़े तो बारिश नहीं हो रही, आसमान साफ है. होता है ऐसा? Sometime in a particular area you are finding that of course clouds are very dense, काले बादल. But of course when you are going 2 or 3 kilometers away from that particular area, the sky remain clear. I mean two different atmospheric conditions are prevailing, which are in over those areas which are in proximity with each other. Why two different atmospheric conditions are prevailing? Because between the two we are finding a boundary. That boundary is called as what? Front. So if you are on this side of front, then you can receive rainfall. वहां पर आप देखोगे बारिश हो रही है. But when you are going on the other side of front, you are going to find of course what? Clear sky, धूप निकली हुई है. So in our daily life we are experiencing of course the formation of these type of boundaries or these type of climatological phenomena called as frontogenesis, I mean formation of front. Front is nothing but a boundary between two contrasting air mass. And when I use the term two contrasting air mass, it means one air mass should be warm, other air mass should be cold. अब दोनों air mass आपस में टकरा रही हैं. And then of course a boundary develop, the boundary is called as what? Front. Now front मैं आगे बताऊंगा, अभी पहले सुन लो केवल इसको, ये कंसेप्ट को दिमाग में बैठा लो, इस पर हम आगे डिटेल में बात करेंगे. Front is never perpendicular to the surface, but front is always inclined. The inclination could take place on either side. Why? Because sometimes the warm air able to flow with a very high velocity and it able to inculcate in the zone of cold air. So the declination, I mean inclination of front would be towards cold air. When the cold air able to flow with a very high speed, velocity, the inclination of front would be on the other side. मैंने example के लिए यहाँ पे ये ले लिया. Because a two air mass could flow, or normally they are flowing with different velocities, different speed. So when the two contrasting air mass are going to converge with each other, of course, a boundary that develop between the two is called as what? Front. Now listen, warm air which is coming from a particular area, which is carrying high temperature, quite obvious. Warm air always remain much more lighter air parcel, halki hai. So when the warm air converge with the cold air, warm air is not in a position to push the cold air. Yeah, cold air can push the warm air. So now what the warm air would do, when it converge with cold air, the warm air shall start rising from the boundary of front. अच्छा देखो, warm air को जाने के लिए जगह नहीं बची, because the cold air has created an obstacle in the movement of warm air. So what the warm air would do? The warm air shall rise from the boundary of front. Agree? Front is nothing but the boundary between two contrasting air mass, frontier. But when the warm air is rising from the boundary of front, be very sure, then which condition again would develop over the boundary of front, surface of front? Low pressure. Because warm air always carry low pressure. Cold air always carry high pressure. So now the warm air parcels are rising from the boundary of front. Achha, once the cold air mass reaches at the place of A, the cold air mass would found that, cold air mass को ये पता चलेगा कि now the low pressure condition develops over front. So what the cold air mass would do? Again the cold air mass also start rising from the boundary of front. Why the cold air is rising? Because cold air is always in search of, air or wind, they are always in search of low pressure. So both air parcels start rising from the surface of A. Now presume if both the air parcels would have stayed over A, then they would or they could have created which condition? High pressure. अगर यहाँ पर ये रुक जाती दोनों एयर तो यहाँ पर हाई प्रेशर बना देती. But both the air parcels are rising. Not only the warm air parcels are rising, but the warm air parcel would be chased by cold air parcel, and both the air parcels start rising from the surface of A. When both the air parcels start rising, then which condition would develop over A? Of course, a relative, which condition? Low pressure condition. Now listen, already we are finding low pressure condition over A, and that low pressure condition get maintained. Why? Because the two air parcels are rising. Not only warm but also cold. Cold is chasing the warm. High pressure chases the low pressure. And both air parcels start rising. So low pressure condition get maintained and get intensified. Now presume what I want to establish. See, अब जरा concept को समझिएगा. Concept ये है कि at 30 degree northern or southern latitude we are finding a subtropical belt called a subtropical high pressure belt. ठीक है? Here we are finding one more pressure belt. That pressure belt is located at 90 degree north or south. I am taking the example of northern hemisphere, called as polar high pressure belt. And between subtropical high pressure belt and polar high pressure belt, we are finding one more pressure belt. That pressure belt, I hope you are able to connect, at 60 degree north and south hemisphere is called a subpolar low pressure belt. Now over the subpolar area we are finding low pressure. So the winds which are coming, the air mass or winds which are coming from subtropical area are relatively warmer. The winds which are coming from polar area are extremely cooler. Just see this diagram. See, so the winds which are coming from subtropical area here, they are extremely warmer, because they are originating from warm area, tropical subtropical area, and the winds which are coming from poles are extremely cooler. But both these contrasting air mass, the cold wind coming from pole and warm wind coming from subtropical area, they are going to converge over subpolar latitudes. And subpolar areas are the zone where the formation of front take place. Front is nothing but a boundary between two contrasting air masses. Once the front develops, देखो जरा, once the front develops, the warm air mass shall rise from the boundary of cold air mass over front, and then the cold air shall chase the warm air mass, high pressure chase the low pressure. And when both air mass start rising, then which condition would prevail over the surface? That pressure condition is called as what? Low pressure condition, and then we regard that low pressure area as subpolar low pressure belt.